Our intro music is provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Nightdreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, I certainly try, but there's days, well, I can't do it. But what can I say, John? You know, I wish I could tell jokes like you do. Anyway, we have a great guest tonight. If you're into UFOs, we have Charles Van Hayden on, and he'll be on right after this. Well, anyway, yeah, I'm still recovering from the flu. I was sick with the flu for about a week and a half. So if you all of a sudden hear me all of a sudden talking and then it goes quiet for a split second, that's because I'm going to have to hit the panic button here. And well, you don't want to hear coughing. Hey, Charles, how you doing tonight, my friend?
Quite well, Gary. Thank you.
Well, what part of the country are you in?
I'm in the general area of Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, wow. How's the weather been over in Nashville?
Oh, we get so much rain. I tell my friends in Portland, Oregon, you think you get rains because you've got the Rose Festival in May. We get about twice as much as you do. And I looked it up I looked it up one day, and sure enough, we get 57 inches, and they get about 30.
Oh, wow.
A year.
Oh, wow. I mean, you know, you better not have a boat in your backyard. It might float away at that rate.
Float away, that's right.
Well, why don't you tell our listenership a little bit about yourself?
Well, sure. I've been writing for almost 11 years now, and quite truthfully, I started back in 1988, but didn't go very far with it for various reasons. I wrote a very short science fiction story and submitted to a online contest and didn't do very well because I was actually in bed with a broken leg. So probably it affected my my literary talents at the time. But after a while, I decided around 10 years ago, I said, you know, I really am an author. I communicate well. And so I decided to write some books. And one of them was called Confessions of an Alien Marooned on Earth. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, you're coming in fine.
Okay. And the interesting thing about the book, it's actually a novella. It's only 160 pages long. But it's 50% true and 50% fiction. And I can't tell you what's the true part. You have to guess after you read it.
So you're making the people who buy the book have to make, flip a coin. Which part is real and which part isn't? Do they read the book?
That's right. That's right. So I finished that book, and a friend read it, and he liked it a lot. In fact, he liked it so much, he decided he was going to be an author, and he started writing his science fiction story, and he's still writing it 10 years later, but he'll finish it eventually.
Well, that's as bad. You know, honestly, Charles, when I was in junior high school, one of my teachers, said, hey, you take this book home and read it. And it happened to be War and Peace. Well, I sat there and put it on my dresser. I had like a week a week to read it. And I tell you what I didn't do. I didn't read it. And, then it came up to, have to take a test and tell the class about, the book, what I found interesting. And I sat there and I figured, okay, I got to come up with a good story on this one. So I told the teacher, I said, well, I read all my books in the closet. And the teacher said, okay, that's no problem. And I said, yeah, but there is a problem. There's no light in the closet. So how can you read a book in the closet with no light? And she goes, in other words, you didn't read it. I said, no, I didn't read it. I told you I have no light in my closet. She took that as so funny that she actually gave me a passing grade for not even reading the book.
Well, yeah. Well, teachers still do like a bit of humor in their day.
Well, at least for me, that saved me from, failing another class at that time. But, aliens and stuff on this earth, I really have strong suspicions that we do have aliens that are coming and going and maybe even working with our government. And it's just been so many different things, with sightings of aliens. Peter Davenport, the UFO Reporting Center, has recently said on my show that he's gotten reports lately across the country of people seeing aliens in weird places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he's
no doubt. No, it's no longer as to if they exist. It's just how many exist, and where can you go and actually see their manifestations.
I don't know. I myself don't want to see one. It's bad enough seeing my ex-wife about every 10 years.
Well, here's the thing. Now, that first novella was what my friend read, and you know what he said right after he finished it? I'll just tell you because you probably won't guess. He said, it's not finished yet. Chaz, I go by Chaz with my friends.
Okay.
He said, it's not finished yet. It doesn't end. I go, I looked at it and I went, no, you're right. It didn't really end completely. So I wrote a sequel, and it's called Fox and Falcon, and it's 2 out of the 3 novellas, which now I've called as a volume itself called Exile to Earth. I renamed it because I also wrote a script for a movie based on that of 3 books.
Oh, wow. Have you submitted it to any companies yet, motion picture companies?
I have done a bit, but until you have a big name and have something out there, they kind of look at your stuff and they kind of go, well, I don't want to spend $10 million on somebody I don't, haven't got some kind of track record. So it's been rough. I had my biggest chance was, or my biggest validation was Harvey Weinstein's company got back to me and says, "Oh, we're doing something just like that, Mr. Van Huyten." And I said, "Sure, you didn't even read the script."
Well, maybe they got some ideas from your script when they got it.
Yeah, well, then a couple of years later, out came The Martian, which is my story is a reverse of that story, where he is stranded. Watley, the main character, is stranded by his crew members because they think he's dead. He's on Mars, and they're coming back to Earth, which takes 4.5 months, right? And he's still alive. The antenna went through his suit and plugged the hole, otherwise he'd be dead. Otherwise, all the oxygen would have gone out of his suit. So now he's stranded all by himself on a distant planet. My guy is from another sector of the universe, and he is banished from his planet and comes here, not just, currently, he's been here for quite some time, and he doesn't even know he's an alien until he meets another guy who shocks him one day, temporarily, gets into a nightmare that night, and he goes into this realization, he goes, my God, no wonder I don't like living here on this Earth. I'm an alien, I don't belong here. So that starts the story, is him getting into a whole lot of adventures and figuring out how he's going to either create, develop, or find a way back to his home planet.
Well, that part is interesting. Getting back with our technology, unless he has the capability of designing his own to get back. Yeah. I think he's got a problem.
Yeah, he did. That's the problem in the book. Actually, the next 250 pages are about how he solves the problem. So, and he's also a aeronautics major in the university, so that helps. He's rubbing shoulders with engineers and scientists and people, and he's always hoping that he'll run into somebody who, read the book.
Oh, wow. Getting back to writing screenplays, I had, an author on my show back maybe 2 months ago. He wrote, quite a few for, Star Trek The Next Generation, and also for, what's that other one they did when they were up on that, Space 9 or whatever that was, one of the...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, he said, a lot of times he would sit there and send the script in, they would fly him there, and then they look at it, and then, then they all start rewriting everything, and he got done that, and he goes, wow, it's not even the same story I had to begin with. But I mean, at least it gave him, I guess, an idea for, one of the episodes and stuff like that.
Well, I would say to the listeners, if you're truly interested in getting the grist of the whole thing with aliens and UFOs, is to start with the very first books that were ever written about it. And that's George Adamski's Flying Saucers Are Real in 1953. and then you have this guy. Flying saucers have landed. These are all in the early 50s, just after the sightings and after the Air Force had put together Project Blue Book, you know. And this is always a good recommendation, is to go to the source materials, the earliest materials, because as time progresses, things get, as you can tell by the screenplays that you were talking about, people want to create and get involved and kind of add their little, you know, pieces of wisdom to it, and it sometimes goes off on tangents, and it's no longer the real story.
Yeah. Now, honestly, Charles, what's your feeling? Do you feel like we are being visited by UFOs, and are they walking among us, and are they working with the government?
Well, here's the thing. There's no reason not to expect that there would be some sub rosa, some secretive things going on. I was telling you, I'd tell you later in the show, but I'll tell you now. In 1989, I lived on Martell Avenue in Hollywood with my brother. And I went up on the roof. It was a summer. It was kind of warm. So I went up on the roof. And as I was looking out over the city, it was around 8 o'clock at night, and it was just gotten dark. It was just past dusk. And I saw a glowing light that was sitting over a Shakey's Pizza Parlor on Santa Monica Boulevard, which is only about 6 blocks away. So I know it was there, and I could see it. I didn't need a telescope. And it was just there, and it hovered there for about 45 seconds, and then whoosh, it disappeared. Just boom, gone. So that's been my personal experience. And if you talk to a lot of people, like 100, 200 people, and you talk to them when they're, you know, they've got time to talk to you and they're in a calm, they'll usually say something like, you know, I either have seen something like that, or a friend of mine has told me that. You know? That's how prevalent it is. And if you go down to South America, people welcome you with open arms. They say, oh, but of course, you know, por supuesto, senor. It happens every day here, you know.
Well, I think...
And that's in my book also.
I think it happens every day, everywhere. It's just... You know, we are so good at propaganda in our country of trying to cover things up. And, you know, it's got to a point. I mean, how can I say this? People would have to be awful low intelligence not to believe that there is something happening. I mean, you know, with UFO sightings, aliens and things like that, there's just been too many of them. Going all the way back, in the 40s up here in Washington State, around Mount Rainier, one of the major sightings there. I mean, you know, just all kinds of weird things has happened. You know, that 2 pilots from the aircraft carrier, back a few years ago, it got released last November for some weird reason, you know, where they were chasing after a UFO, even with their afterburners and all that stuff. And now that is circulated, and the government really didn't deny it. But, Charles, it was really funny. After that hit in November, come January, the Secretary of the Air Force was talking to the graduating cadets, and it was telling the cadets, it was kind of a strange thing. He said, well, our next war will not be a ground war. It will be in outer space.
Interesting.
Well, then
well, that's a prediction.
Yeah, that is a very good prediction. Then it was even funnier yet. Then you have Trump a few months later saying, you know, jokingly in a press conference, well, maybe I should create a space force. And then a few months later, then, you know, they submitted into, you know, the Pentagon to get it started. I don't know if it's going to go or fly or not. I don't know how we even have the money to fund it. And I don't know why the Air Force couldn't handle it, because they already do have basically a space force. But it's really funny is all this stuff is kind of, you know, slowly coming out.
Well, I wrote an essay. I wrote a couple essays on this subject, and your listeners may be interested in looking for them online. One is Our Planet versus Theirs, is the name of one of them. It's only about 2 pages, I think. And in it, I allude to the fact that one of the reasons why we're not getting a very communication with aliens is because, let's face it, they know we're a warlike civilization. They don't want to come down and wind up as experimental test bodies in some laboratory or be hunted. It's not too far from. It's not too far-fetched to realize there are a lot of guys in Alabama, rednecks with shotguns and so forth. And they'd come after these guys if they didn't look like them, right? They'd go, we got to get rid of these guys quick, So one of the things that is a barrier is that the fact that we are really not ready. We're not civilized enough throughout our nations to accept the fact that there may be superior beings that can get from one end of the universe to the other in a matter of days or weeks, and we can't even get to Mars,
Yeah, and we basically have to use, a rocket to do what we're doing. I mean, it's just basically like shooting a bow and arrow up in the sky. I mean, we really don't still even have the capabilities to really go out in space and do anything unless the government has stuff, that we don't know about.
Yeah, very true.
And
now, another thing that might be of interest to our listeners is the subject of Atlantis. And the reason I bring up Atlantis, because I've studied that and read many books on it, is that Atlantis was a very advanced civilization that existed 10, 12,000 years ago before it went under. And even Plato has written about it. And later I might just read from one of his essays about what he says, a war between the Greeks, the Athenians, and the Atlanteans. But it goes back even further than that. But just going back 12,000 years, you realize there's been a tremendous history of alien visitors and alien populations and even, stations where these type of ships would come and go, and there'd be all kinds of, parlay and and who knows, there'd be a transference of technology from one civilization to another, and so forth. I'm sure that is something of interest to our listeners because it's not a new idea. Even this last century, it's not a new thing. It's just that there's a lot more interest in it because we're more technologically advanced in this new century and in the 20th century where we can get the word out. We have the internet, we've got television, we've got, we can do all kinds of things with this information, whereas 150 years ago, what did you have? You had the Pony Express.
Oh, or you had the telegraph. I mean, before it burned
or the
up.
telegraph,
Yeah. But I mean, now, let's face it, if I saw a UFO sighting, I can get on my computer and thousands and tens of thousands of people will know about it within a few minutes.
That's right. And these pictures that have been taken by some of these researchers have been validated. A lot of them have been invalidated, have been found to be false and phony because there's always, jokers who want to fool around with something just to get a little bit of notoriety. But there's thousands of excellent photographs, very clear photographs that are not phony. And that's something else that people can look at and make a decision on, well, yeah, it looks like it's real, so, it's not for me, whatever. You always have a choice to not know something,
Well, what is really bad, though? Technology. From the standpoint, people go out and they buy a digital camera, and they don't realize the sensor in it can get dust on it. And they go out and, they start taking pictures. They don't even up the sky, hoping to get a UFO without even seeing one. Then they post it like on Facebook or some other media, right? That, oh, look at this UFO, or there's 3 of them. And then when you you take their image, at least I have the capability because I also was a professional photographer for many years. And I was one of the very first people to get Photoshop when it originally, even before it came out, as one of the beta testers. The thing is, you blow it up and you start looking at, well, that isn't a UFO. That's a dust bunny on their sensor, or 3 of them. Because they take like a series of pictures, and then when you sit there and blow it all up and analyze it, that's in every one of their pictures. When they blow it up, they don't realize a fast f-stop at the sky, any dust on their sensor is going to show up, and they think automatically it's a UFO. The same as they think there's orbs.
Yeah, you've hit a very important point in researchers. You might call Achilles' heel. There's a website called FeedSpot, and it collects globally all of the reports of UFOs and sightings, and passes them on to subscribers for about $2 a month. So I became a subscriber about a week ago, and I'm just inundated with the number of reports and photos. In fact, I was looking at one yesterday. But unfortunately, the two films were of a spot so far in the distance. You know, it just glimmered for a second. You couldn't tell whether it was a piece of aluminum foil floating in the air or what. So yeah, the amateurs have it pretty rough because they can't really prove anything with it. But you take a guy like George Adamski, flying saucers are real. He spent sometimes weeks in one position with his camera focused in one area until a sighting. And he has excellent photographs. You see, he's a professional. He also used some of the Mount Palomar Observatory small telescopes to photograph much closer these spaceships and flying saucers. So yeah, so the amateurs is kind of got one foot in the bucket there, whereas the pros, they know what it takes to get a product, a real picture or a real video.
I hate to say this, and I don't want to get people mad at me, but, before I would post a picture of, if I thought I had a UFO, I would certainly take the time to make sure that it wasn't a piece of dust on the sensor before, publishing it to people to see, because then your credibility of your group or as the individual is totally ruined. I mean, when somebody looks at it and debunks it, oh, that isn't no UFO. That's piece of lint or dust on your sensor. And I've seen it so many times, especially on Facebook. I mean, there's so many people posting pictures up there thinking, well, this is a UFO or it's an orb or whatever. And then I'll sit there and I'll analyze it and I go, well, that's a no UFO. But, that kind of does damage to the paranormal. It really does, because I really think before somebody publishes something, they need to at least have a little something to back it up.
Mm-hmm. Can I give you another experience that I didn't have but my friends had, which I believe is to be totally truthful about sightings of saucers?
Yeah, please do.
Well, I had some friends. This was probably in the mid-'70s. They were in the area known as, it's where... I'm just thinking it's yellow. It's where Atlantis supposedly had sunk. Canary Islands. And it's not Canary because of the color. Canary comes from canis, from dog. The islands have been known to have lots of different dogs. In the Canary Islands, and they were on the starboard side of the ship, and there was a saucer within about 300 yards of the ship. Very large. One of these silver rotating things, and very much interested in what was going on the ship for some reason. And the captain of the ship told them, he says, don't bother with them, just get on with your duties. And after about 4 or 5 minutes, the saucer took off. And that's a bona fide story from friends I trust.
Well, I really believe it, because, I used to years ago, I don't know if you remember, Republic Airlines.
Mm-hmm.
But they were,
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
One of my friends at the time was a vice president. I don't remember of what division of Republic Airlines, but he worked his way up. But before he got onto the airlines, he used to fly B-52 bombers, from Guam to Vietnam, drop their load and then go back. And, he made a mistake one time that when he was flying to Nam, to drop his load, he saw a UFO off his wing, and he reported it on the radio, and they told him, to go to another frequency and shut up. This is the story, and I believe him 100%, because when he got back, they separated everybody, the whole crew, in the separate rooms. There was non-military guys, probably CIA or whatever, basically. telling him, you can never talk about this. If you do, that's the end of your career. We can bring, charges against you, whatever the threats. Okay, he kept quiet, I don't know for how many years till he told me this story. But he also said that being the vice president of Republic Airlines, because he was a pilot, before he made vice president, one of the divisions, that pilots would, basically report they saw a UFO. And once they said they saw a UFO, their career was gone. That was it.
Yeah. Well, there is definitely an implanted, I would use the word implanted, proscription, not proscription against speaking about it in public or in any official capacity because of this implanted thought in the society. I won't go into how I know about this, but just like, have you ever seen a hypnotist or gone on to a comedy venue, and instead of there being a comedian, there'll be a hypnotist who gets up on stage and he calls for subjects to come up on the stage, and he hypnotizes them very quickly. If they're susceptible, if they're not, he gets them off the, sends them away. And he has them do all kinds of strange things. And when he finally is done and he brings them back, they don't remember a thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Don't remember anything that happened, and we're laughing at them, and they're doing funny things. Like one woman, I went to one of these, and he told the one woman, he says, after he hypnotized her, he says, you're looking for your behind. You can't find your behind. And she goes all over the stage looking for her behind, and people are just, cracking up and laughing. And when she finally comes out of it, he says, did you find your behind? She goes, huh? Yeah, and there's some more snickers at the end of that. So there can be in society an actual hypnotic command that warns or says, don't go into this area, don't talk about or communicate about this area. And I believe that's part of the reason why this whole thing gets shut down. There's a shut-off on it, especially at higher levels of responsibility, because that pilot knows other pilots, or himself would, in his flying, would be in touch with a lot of the people in other countries and so forth. And if he were to start babbling about this, or not babbling, but just talking about it, his superiors see this as a bad thing. And let me give you one more reference here. Foo Fighters. You know what that is?
Oh, yeah.
You know where that comes from?
Yeah, but World War II.
Okay. Have you discussed that with other guests on your show?
I've had one person touch lightly on it.
What did you learn from that discussion with that guest about Foo Fighters? What
I learned was that he was talking about during World War II. He was talking about like with the Luftwaffe, attacking, and all of a sudden, during an attack, a UFO would be in the background.
Yeah, very small, and several of them, not just one. And Hitler and his cronies were trying to get a technology. They were thinking they would capture one, and they would get the technology because these things would just dart everywhere. They couldn't even follow them visually, let alone, tactically. They were after to capture one, and I've seen some documentaries on TV, and I've seen some things on YouTube, but I don't validate them. I just think they're a little bit too much. That a large one was captured at one time in Germany back in the 40s. But the Foo Fighters, those are real, because not only did the Luftwaffe see them, but American fighter pilots also reported these little things, and that's what they are.
Yeah, and it was no way, too, from
they're little spaceships. They're little saucers. They're little. And may I just suggest to your audience a book I just came across. I somehow have this knack for learning about or pulling in books and references. It's called Saucer, Savage Planet by Stephen Kuntz, Coonts, a marvelous story about saucers, about again, interestingly enough, a stranded alien on this planet. And In it, he talks about the mothership is way far above Earth, and it sends drones and smaller little ships to go out and do what? Same thing our drones that we've developed to do. Reconnaissance. It's reconnaissance. They send these they're looking around for things to take pictures of or audio of. And of course, in this book, he talks about sampling DNA and harvesting DNA because the inhabitants of their planet can't produce children anymore. So they're trying to get an answer to that and find out how to get that going again before the entire planet dies out. Excellent book. It's called Saucer, Savage Planet.
Well, I do believe that we are definitely being visited. One of the guests, Timothy Cullen, was abducted and had an implant, which Dr. Roger Lear removed. I got an image of the implant. When it was sent out to be analyzed, it had some silver in it, but the silver ingredient was nothing that could be compounded on Earth. That's what the report said.
Yeah.
And then it was some other
That's the usual.
Yeah, and then it was some other type of whatever in it that it could not have been formed on Earth. And, that was in his arm, if I remember.
Yeah, that's right. Now, I want to also caution your listeners, if you do go looking for, if you're the kind of person that has a telescope or you're the next greatest photographer with your iPhone, because they do have great pictures now. They take terrific pictures. I caution you that if you do actually get close enough to a UFO, within, I would say blocks, there's this possibility. See, not all visitors are, how should I say, benign. Most of them are benign. Most of them are pretty cool cats. I think they're pretty cool cats. But there's a group of them that I wouldn't mess with. And maybe that's what's gotten people, a little bit worried or, anxious about being visited, because some of them don't have good intentions. A small percentage, just like us, just like our society. You got the criminals, and you got the people that are hardworking and trying to keep their nose clean and make a go of it. So best thing to do is just to take a picture and go home.
Yeah, and not even stay in that area. But it's so true, because some of the how can I say it? Some of the reports of these so-called aliens are not the friendly type creatures that I don't know if you know who Mary Joyce is. She runs a group, a reporting center for like UFOs and Bigfoot, and it's called SkyShipsOverCashiers.com. She's a monthly guest on my show. She talks about reports and stuff that comes in. She claims in North Carolina there's an underground base that has, aliens involved in that base. And she said that she's interviewed a couple high-up people that she really believes what the information they gave her about it is true. And she said that these type of aliens are the type of ones that supposedly even goes back, remember when Eisenhower supposedly made a pact with the aliens, for technology, claiming that, the rumor was going around that, he said basically you could abduct a certain amount of people, but it has to be this number and no more. But what she claims that these so-called bad aliens are the type that, they like humans, but not in the form of, hey, let's be friends. The same way you go to McDonald's and get a burger.
Yeah. That's pretty grim. Hey, you mentioned Eisenhower. I'm just looking at an article here. Says 1960 memo to President Eisenhower aimed at locating the lost world map of Columbus, which would be the lost world map of Atlantis. Eisenhower was kind of a wild dude. I mean, he was a successful general, but when he became president, I think he kind of maybe gone off the kilter there a little bit. Not that wanting to see if there was a map of Atlantis, but he seemed to have got himself into some non-presidential areas. That's all I'm going to say about him. Of course, he's not with us anymore. But even he was interested in UFOs. And don't forget, our president, Jimmy Carter, was televised in an interview saying he had seen a UFO. Jimmy Carter, okay? Of course, he was denounced for, and he was, boo-hooed and, was mocked. But he came out and said it. He's still alive, by the way, and still operating.
Oh, yeah, and he's battling cancer again. But, I will say this. My dad served, World War II and in Korea. And while he's waiting to get discharged in Korea, he made a very good friend, the actor James Gardner. You remember the TV show Rockford Files?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Sure do.
when I was a little kid, I didn't know who James Gardner was. And like every summer, he would come up for about a week and, it'd visit my dad. And they go out and whatever they would do, run around in the Seattle area. And, when I got older, I kind of recognized because I started watching, the reruns of Maverick. And I go, oh, my God. I said to my dad, is that your friend? He goes, yeah, that's my friend. Anyway, I got to know, as I got older, James really good. And, I really had an infatuation with Ronald Reagan. And at that time, I think I was like about 15 or 16. I can't remember my age exactly. Ronald Reagan had this thing where young people could call up and talk to him once a month on national radio and ask the president questions. Well, anyway, my dad's friend got a hold of, because I guess he was good friends with Reagan, and Reagan called me to be on a show, and he talked to me for about 5 minutes. And we just talked about general, questions, asking what's it like to be a president and stuff like that. Well, anyway, after the show, I got a phone call, from the president, Mr. Reagan. And we talked maybe for 45 minutes, just talked about things. And then I talked to him, numerous times or several times after that, off and on. And one time I asked him, about the Star Wars and all this stuff that they were really trying to push. And it was funny. Mm-hmm. He was in the conference, and he had a tendency of slipping up and telling people what was on his mind. And I remember the conversation we were talking, and I said, well, is that going to, protect us against Russia? Because if you remember at one point, he was on national news, and he didn't realize the microphone was on, and he kind of joked around. He goes, let's nuke Russia. And it went over national, TV and radio and all that, his little comment. I kind of made a mark. I said, is this really to protect, us from a nuclear war with Russia? And he goes, no, it's for them out there. And then he wouldn't say another word about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I hear you. I hear you.
So that really, I didn't think much of it being young until I got older, and then all of a sudden, I started thinking that little comment he made, kind of made me wonder, like, out there, them, what's that mean? And then I started realizing, well, maybe he's talking about those people, the UFOs, aliens, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Hey, can I take a moment and read this little thing from Plato?
Yeah,
about
please.
Atlantis?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is from one of his works called Critias, 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 which is basically a personality that he uses to argue back and forth about life and about various things. It says here in the middle of this conversation, let me begin by observing, first of all, that 9,000 was the sum of years which had elapsed since the war, which was said to have taken place between those who dwelt outside the pillars of Hercules, or Heracles, it's pronounced properly, and all who dwelt within them. This war I am going to describe. Of the combatants on the one side, the city of Athens was reported to have been the leader and to have fought out the war. The combatants on the other side were commanded by the kings of Atlantis, which, as was saying, was an island greater in extent than Libya and Asia. I want you to make note of that. Greater in extent than Libya and Asia. You know how big they are. And when afterwards sunk by an earthquake, became an impassable barrier of mud to voyagers sailing from hence to any part of the ocean. The progress of the history will unfold the various nations of barbarians and families of the Hellenes, which is the Greeks, which then existed, as they successfully appear on the scene. But I must describe, first of all, Athenians of that day and their enemies who fought with them, and then the respective powers and governments of the two kingdoms. And then he proceeded to do that. So that's his reference to Atlantis.
Now, they're speculating now. Now, you know how things go on the internet. You take everything with a grain of, salt, or sand or whatever you want to say. But, as Antarctica is starting to break up and melt, there's some scientists starting to say, well, maybe that's where Atlantis is, because that was a continent that got froze over. What's your feeling about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me clarify something. If you Google Columbus, the explorer Columbus, discovered America, didn't really, Vikings did. Columbus's map of Atlantis, you put that in the Google search or in Bing, you're going to come up with several citations. And if you look carefully, there's one that shows a map, and it's of South America as being Atlantis. Now, South America, as you know, is the closest continent to Antarctica. So you go back tens, 20s of thousands of years, it very likely could have been that there was a landmass between the two even. Remember, it says greater in extent than Libya and Asia. That's what Atlantis was. It was no small place. It was very, very, very large. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Well, we do know that the land masses have drifted apart through the years. And, I got a funny feeling that, maybe in about another 30, 40 years, we're going to find a lot of weird things we never thought could have existed is going to pop up in Antarctica.
Yeah. Well, that thing's been frozen there for hundreds of thousands of years. It may just prove what we're talking about is going to be, common sense or a household word. Now, look at the things which we didn't have 50 years ago that we would have called, go back 100 years, flying was, ridiculed. 120 years ago, cars, what they call it, what did they call the car the first time? The horseless buggy,
Oh, yeah.
You start coming forward and you have all these inventions and these creations that the people at the time would go, boo-hoo, we don't need that. That doesn't really exist. Come on, you can't do that. You can't talk overseas from America to England on a telephone. It's impossible, And you come forward, and then what do you have? Then you have radio, then you have TV, then you have color TV, then you have jets. First you have airplanes, airliners, DC-3s, and then you have, oh my God, this guy Chuck, what was his name? Chuck Yeager. He crashes the sound barrier, and all this happens within 100 years, right?
Well,
all this is happening. Now we have cell phones. Now we have internet. Now we have a camera. Listen to this: a camera. Would you believe there's a camera that can take 1 trillion frames in a second?
Oh, I wouldn't doubt that.
1 trillion. That's a mind-boggling number, a trillion. In a second. It can slow down a bullet so that you could actually read the bullet's maker, manufacturer's name on it. And you can also Google that too and see the video. It's phenomenal.
Well,
I keep bookmarks. I keep bookmarks for all these phenomenal and unusual and paranormal things, because pretty soon none of this is going to be paranormal. It's going to be normal.
Yeah, pretty much. Even like satellites. I didn't realize how far advanced satellites are taking pictures. I sat there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I took. I wanted to see my house, my property, and I, I got on a satellite. I was looking at some of the pictures of my property. I could make out my horses. I could make out my vehicles. I could make out my motorcycle sitting in the driveway, and then I could see my wife in her bathing suit, or part of her bathing suit anyway.
Luckily, there was no nude sunbathing in the backyard.
Actually, she was topless, and you know what? You could make everything out. That I saw that, and I'm going, wow. I mean, that is scary. that the capabilities we have. If somebody said that 50 years ago, we would have that capability, you'd look at them like, oh, that guy's, crackers.
You're cuckoo. Yeah, you're cuckoo. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how far.
Well, that's that implanted thing. It's just it's not okay. Yeah, it's not okay.
Now I got to ask you a question too. I've had some guests on my show. The guest I have, he wrote a book about the Aurora incident that happened in Aurora, Texas, in the late 1800s, where a UFO hit a water tower and then crashed. But he had a story he told me when he was a kid, and I can't remember. It was down south. I can't remember the town he was in, but his father was a police dispatcher, and all of a sudden they got phone calls that there was a UFO in the hospital parking lot. Now, when he was telling me about this, I didn't really believe it, but I started doing some research, before I had him on the show. And yes, the local newspaper talked about supposedly a UFO landed in the hospital parking lot and then immediately supposedly took off. And, and I believed it and I didn't believe it type of thing. But what he was saying that, his family, went down with a lot of people and they saw it. They didn't see the UFO, but they saw the ring where it burned into the asphalt of the parking lot. Yeah. And what he found it was interesting. There was droplets of mercury. It looked like mercury metal, droplets all around the circumference of where the UFO burned into the asphalt. The funny thing is, this happened, I don't know what time of night, but all of a sudden, the next morning, all of a sudden, during the middle of the night, the parking lot got repaved. Re-asphalted during the night. But the funny thing is, the next day, there was, I think, like 30 miles away, and I can't remember the town, but there was a lake. And witnesses said they saw a UFO come out of the lake and fly off. And that was 30 miles from this town. So it makes me wonder, like, for some reason that UFO had to land for a second because of heat or whatever issue it was, took off, and then, landed into some lake, close by to whatever they had to do. But I've done a lot of research on that, and there's been a lot of cases where, UFOs are sighted in the ocean, in lakes, and stuff like that.
Gary, they've got paintings from the medieval times showing cigar-like things floating over people's heads. There's nothing but what? There's nothing else that flies through the air except a cannonball in those days, or a bird, and it's not a bird or a cannonball. So what could it be? It has to be, and then if I flying object, a saucer or a cigar-shaped, spaceship of some sort. They're in the paintings.
Well, yeah, but if you want to go farther back, let's go back to prehistoric man in the caves, drawings of men flying contraptions in the sky. Yeah. Let's look at it. Prehistoric men, or at that age of man, they would even wouldn't comprehend man even flying in the sky, let alone. And then they had some type of helmets on and weird stuff, My feeling, I've had a couple people on my show that, swear up and down from the research they have done that, hey, the Earth has probably been rebooted several times. And, and so maybe, our technology, what we think is so far advanced, I don't know what reboot we're in, but,
Well, does the name Anunnaki sound familiar to you? Does that ring a bell?
Sort of, yes.
Yeah, okay, that would be the civilization that took what we know as the, sometimes the words don't come as fast as I'd like them to come, but the monkey type organism that lived 200,000 years ago, and they mated with it and made it so that it could stand up, because you have Homo habilis, which was on 4 legs, and you have Homo erectus, and then you have Homo sapiens. You see, something caused a improvement in the mobility and also the intelligence of that particular animal. And I assure you, it came not from this planet; it came from some other planet. But the Anunnaki and the Nephilim in the Bible, in the Jewish or the Hebrew Bible, they call them Nephilim. Those who were cast down. That's how it translates in the Greek. And if you don't know Greek, then you won't. If you do know Greek, you'll know that's what it means. This guy Sitchin, the War of Men and Gods, his books, and Stairway to Heaven. I read them many years ago. Intensely interesting, where he documents, because he could read the Greek, whereas the other scholars couldn't, and he could translate directly from those periods of time the actual records of spaceships landing and cultivating the Earth and making what we would consider cavemen, making them civilized and giving them the tools to, have the Bronze Age, and that type of thing. They would never have by themselves have survived or improved without the aid of these extraterrestrials. And there's shows on TV that have been going for years about this, which have a lot of books to read if you want to get into it. But let's get back to what you were saying here. What you were saying about this thing with Reagan. I'm just curious about this thing with Reagan.
Yeah, go ahead.
He said this one thing, but he said other things. That little sound bites that escaped censorship. And I don't recall exactly what they were, but he was definitely one of these guys who was very much in tune with forward-thinking people, when it comes to science, when it comes to outer space and so forth.
Well,
I just want to mention that.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, too. Him and Nancy were in the occult a little bit, too. So, I mean, a lot of decisions they made politically, even with our government, was based on, the stars, the charts, and things like that. But, that will always stick in my mind, because I really valued the conversations I had with them. And again, when you're like 15, 16 years old and somebody said stuff like that, you kind of like blow it off. It wasn't only, back maybe 70s when I got into broadcasting and doing talk shows that it kind of hit me, what he actually said. And, he couldn't say too much because I'm sure everything he said was naturally recorded and monitored. But, when he implied that, it was definitely implying that there's something out there that, and he was probably thinking to protect, that's why they wanted to protect the Earth. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a Space Force, going on we don't even know about. And maybe that's why our current president is trying to create one to cover up what maybe already exists. I don't know.
Yeah. True.
But
that was all very interesting.
But going back to, like I mentioned about Earth being rebooted, the Sphinx itself, the recent reports from scientists, studying the wear marks on the back of the Sphinx, they for years and years and years said, those wear marks were created from sand. Now, the latest theory is it was not created from sand. It was created when it was underwater, under the ocean. Then when we start figuring, when was that area underwater? It puts us back before, we were walking the Earth.
Yeah, sure.
And then, I was looking at some pictures on Google. There's some interesting pictures in Antarctica that kind of look like pyramids. And
oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I should get a hold of those. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, and
are they large? Are these large pyramids like the Giza and the other ones in Egypt?
Yeah, they're shaped like that. They're still covered in ice, but the way stuff is melting and doing this stuff, you can actually see the shapes, and there are like three of them in a close area that they resemble a pyramid. And they are
now. In Zechariah Sitchin's book, I just remember his name. Right? Zechariah Sitchin, his books, Stairway to Heaven and so forth. There's 5 of them, 6 of them. he mentions and diagrams, illustrates with diagrams in the book. He shows how the positioning of the Great Pyramid and the smaller pyramids were actually beacons for extraterrestrials to spot where they should land. You see, in the Fertile Crescent, where life began, on this fifth reboot, as we were talking about, fifth or sixth reboot, in Mesopotamia, back about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. That's what they were for. They were beacons. They weren't burial chambers. They may have been used later as an afterthought. They were beacons you could see, and as you know, if you're talking about satellites, the satellites, pictures of them are very, very clear. You can see them from 200 miles away in Egypt.
Oh yeah, I really think they weren't just burial chambers. You know, well, they from the standpoint that everything was probably mystic to that culture, and they were used as that. But you know, it's not just that. How about some of these? If you go out in an airplane and look at the ground, or from Google and start looking around, you see these weird things like, you know, like arrows in a way, like directions pointing to some weird location, you know, and we're talking about in Africa and some weird countries that look like basically like landing directions for a UFO. Certainly wouldn't be for a 747 because there was no 747s.
Yeah. And the down there in South America, in Peru, Machu Picchu. I may have messed up the spelling of it. It's on a very high plateau, 14,000 feet. There's this flat surface. And in the flat surface, there are these very, very distinct drawings of spaceships and spacemen with helmets, and you know, and these are very, very old, carbon dated back to 1,000, 1,500 years ago, maybe even longer. There's a landing pad, very obvious. You know, you have to be a complete boob not to go and say, "Well, that's a landing pad." You know, it's like an airfield. You know, that's the way it came down.
Well, yeah, I've seen pictures of that. But then you get some people on Facebook, right? You know, when they had the, back in the 20s, when they had the planes flying cross country, you know, carrying the mail, they made long, like, arrows pointing directions, you know, for they would know how to go from point A to point B. And, you know, there's some people been posting that up on the media and saying, see, these are from aliens. No, I just want to clear that up. That was done from that, you know, the Airmail, Express or whatever it was called, you know, for
right.
the pilots could, you know where they were going, you know, the direction.
Right. Well, let's get really real now. Now, how many of the astronauts have reported seeing things outside their portals?
Well, there's been a few of them, but, you know, I hate to say it, the astronauts, basically, at least the first and second generation ones that went to the moon, you know, they had a lot of emotional problems when they came back. But Buzz, you know, has made so many remarks that it makes you wonder, like when he got out and got his feet on the moon, he started talking about, look at those ships, they're bigger than anything we have. And then the story is on that, they were telling him, don't talk, go to the medical channel. And, you know, he kept going on.
Shut down,
Yeah, basically just shut up. But he's come out and has said that he has saw things on the moon that he knew that is nothing we could have.
You know what I'm looking at right now on my screen? Huge cylindrical UFOs spotted in Apollo 9 photo. Very clear.
Yeah.
Several of the astronauts have written, memoirs, and they have a chapter or something about some of their unusual experiences and what they've seen. So you got that too to add to the stack of evidence.
Oh yeah, supposedly one astronaut, I can't remember which one, actually from the what do you call it, the capsule, with the Hasselblad, took pictures of a UFO that was flying right next to it. It's funny. Some of the stuff through the years has kind of leaked out, from NASA. But then when they realize it leaked out, they quickly, delete it or manipulate it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Yeah. Like pictures of buildings on the back of the moon by the flybys.
Yeah.
Like that. Whoa. What are buildings doing on the back of the moon? We didn't put them there. Our guys didn't get there. We were on the other side,
Well, depending on...
warm.
Well, Charles, it depends who you're talking to. If you talk to some people, they'll say, no, that was from our secret space force. We have, lunar base on the backside of the moon. I don't know. I got a funny feeling that, maybe it was a rest stop. They land on the back of the moon, then they come to Earth, and abduct people and take them to the, to experiment on. And some people even get to come back, and some people don't.
Yeah.
Now, have you seen?
Well, we would do this. We would do the same thing if we went to Mars. We would set up a satellite rotating or revolving around Mars, so that we could go down and, do our soil sampling and our testing, and come back and have a place where we could live for 6 months to a year, like we do now. See, we wouldn't have to fly all the way back there each time, which is an 8 to 10 months round trip at best, and sometimes a year and a half at worst. We'd set up a little satellite of some kind there.
Oh, yeah. And you could imagine if we ever do go to Mars, which right now I honestly think we need to worry about our own planet more than going to Mars. But let's say we go to Mars, we create a base on Mars, and let's say underground at Mars, I'm just pretending here now, there's aliens. And all of a sudden, what do you think we would do? We would probably try to capture one, to bring it back to experiment on. The same way they probably do with us. But have you seen some of these pictures coming out of Brazil and South America and all that stuff? And in the jungles of basically humans that have been, how the cows have been, mutilated. There has been
mutilated.
Yeah, there's been some pictures of humans the same way. With their organs removed, certain parts of their body removed. Those
are the bad guys. Those are the bad aliens.
Yeah, in such,
the ones you want to stay away from.
Done the same way that the cows were. I mean, were laser technology, or even better, that no surgeon could ever even do, let alone being out in the jungle and removing certain things. It's scary because you start, reading about like the 411 book of all the people have gone, I take it one step farther, like all these people missing in the forest system for all these years, which is over 14,000 people. How about the people that decide, hey, honey, I'm going to the store, and they never hear from the guy again, Yeah. What about them? And that's a lot of people go missing all the time. But you know what? A lot of times they're not even reported as missing. They're just reported as, whatever. They don't even bother looking for them. Maybe there's no way to look for them because maybe they're not here anymore.
Yeah, maybe not here anymore. That's exactly right.
I will say this, back in the early 2000s when I was in photography, I, took a break for 16 years out of broadcasting because I got burned out. And I took a job as general manager of 3 camera professional stores. And we got a hold of, from Czechoslovakia, the first generation infrared binoculars. And, I go, wow, this is kind of cool. So I took a pair home over the weekend. And, I started stargazing. And then I started seeing, like, things in the sky that would be going a direction, come to a stop, and go zigging a different way, and then, go maybe a different way. And I used one of our clients, they run the observatory up in Puyallup, Washington at the time. They would come in, the director, and I said, I took a pair of these home, and I started watching things in the sky that would zigzag, come to a dead stop, and go, a complete different direction. And
impossible change of directions. Yeah,
and he didn't believe me. I said, okay, well, here, take these home, over the weekend, and come back and tell me Monday what you think. Virtually everybody in their organization came in and ordered a pair. because he came back and he said he saw the same type of weird stuff going on that they couldn't identify, but they couldn't see with their telescopes at the observatory. It didn't show up. So I don't know. It tells you there are things going on out there that with our naked eyes, we can't see it. I can't believe. Now, this is one thing that's got me really frustrated. There's somebody been posting pictures up on the internet of taken with their cell phone with a magnified lens on it of the sun and saying, ooh, there's a spaceship coming out of the sun or going by the sun. No logical way that could be done. And there's a group of people that, actually believe it. It's got the Planet X thing all circulating again because of these pictures. And you look at it and it's not logical. It's impossible. But, I don't know. That's what does damage about the UFOs or the paranormal in general. And I classify, UFOs at this point as paranormal because it's unexplainable.
Yeah, you're right, Gary. It's kind of a misdirector. It's kind of a criticism. They're trying they can't stop the wave of authentic photos and reportings, and they want to. Remember the shut-off implant I'm talking about, that's embedded in society. So what they do is they'll ridicule it by, putting out these false, funny, unbelievably insincere pictures and stories to discredit the good ones. You see, by association, see how that would work?
Oh, yeah. It's called debunking.
Yeah.
But what?
It's false debunking, yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is that there's a lot of people that see it and they believe it. And that is, again, I don't know. Or
what it does, it puts a question in their mind, so they go into an indecisiveness about it, which is the same thing as killing the real thing. When a person can't decide, that's worse than saying, I don't believe it at all. Someone goes, well, maybe it's true. Well, do you ever know a maybe to get anything done? No. Well, it's a limbo. He goes into limbo.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I saw a UFO, Charles, but in 1974, I was coming back. I worked for a while in North Carolina. Now, I lived in Seattle. So, I was driving back with my wife then. I use the word my wife then very bluntly. We got into New Mexico, going through the desert. And I don't remember what the speed limit was. I think it was like 100 miles an hour. It was some really bizarre where you could go really fast. And, I had a GTO at the time, and I was going really fast. And all of a sudden, I've talked about this on my show, all of a sudden, the road lit up all around me, brighter than daylight.
Did it really? That would be a good sign.
And, no, the first thing in my mind is I thought, okay, there must be a helicopter. I must be, going to get pulled over or something's going on, because maybe I was maybe I was going faster than even what the speed limit was supposed to be. So I come to a stop. Now the whole car is lit up bright. Okay. I get out of the car and I couldn't hear a sound in the desert. I didn't hear. Now I was in the military. I know what egg beaters sound like, helicopters sound like. I've been on enough in my life. Yeah. Okay, there was no sound of a helicopter noise, nothing. Totally quiet. It was really bright. And maybe within 10 seconds, that light went poof, and it was gone.
Oh.
And,
that sounds like one. Yeah.
And I had Peter Davenport on my show the very first time, and he was talking about, his experience on his first UFO encounter. And he said, that's kind of like what I had. And then he said, I've had so many reports through the years from very reliable people, the same thing that I kind of went through. I don't know if that was a UFO. I don't know what it was. Maybe we had some technology back in 74 that could do that. I don't know. But, I was afterwards.
Let me give you my educated opinion about this. It's my opinion, but it's an educated opinion. If these visitors, quote unquote visitors, are from distant planets, just the fact that they have the technology to get here would indicate that they have the ability to speak telepathically. They probably don't even use, and a lot of these sightings of aliens, they don't even move their mouths. So they're talking telepathically. If they can talk and receive telepathic thoughts, they can tell the person that they possibly are targeting to take up in one of their, spaceships or vehicles. They may be targeting to see if the person would be hard to get into the spaceship, see, or would they be willing to get into the spaceship. And I don't think you'd be willing from what you've been telling me. So they probably just picked up on your thoughts and whoosh.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
Yeah, I kind of wish they would have took my wife at the time. Yeah, boy, I wasn't that lucky. Or, if there was a UFO and they were checking out our thoughts, they go, oh my God, no, we can't take him. He has enough problems right there.
Oh yeah, bad specimen.
Yeah, well, that is the only. If I classify that as an experience, I don't know what it was, but if it was a UFO, I guess it would be a UFO because it's an unidentified something, and it certainly wasn't a helicopter because, like I said, it didn't make any noise, and it
was overhead. It was up in the air, wasn't it? So it was flying.
The light, was above me. I don't even know how far up it was, but again, I know. From a helicopter, the lights on it, the pattern would be for lighting up. This was more intense of anything I've ever imagined. I mean, even inside the car, it actually hurt my eyes, and it lit up the whole inside of the car.
That is something that is repeated in other stories by people like yourself who aren't trying to pull a quick one, So yeah. I would definitely call that a valid story.
Well, I don't know what it was, but I'll tell you, it shook me up driving from New Mexico back to Seattle.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I stopped at the very closest store from that point, started buying no-dos, if you remember what those were, and I started living on no-dos. And, I drove the rest of the way nonstop back home and crashed for 3 days because, I was so exhausted. But I was that shook.
Wait a minute. Was your former wife with you? Did you mention your former wife was with you?
She was in the car, and she was screaming like you wouldn't believe, and And I will say this. There was a car behind us, maybe a couple 100 feet. It stopped, too. And, I wasn't smart enough, after it took off. Again, my rational thinking is, okay, it's gone. I'm out of here. I didn't want to stop back and, try to talk to whoever was in the car back a couple 100 feet.
Tempt the devil, right.
Yeah, I just I wanted out of there. And, and then all the way home, that night, because it was dark, everything, my wife was so paranoid. Every time she saw an airplane light, going by, oh my God, they're following us. It was horrible. And, it's just an experience, that, hey, I don't know what it was, but, thank God I wasn't abducted because, talking with Timothy, he doesn't remember, it's funny. I don't know if you know anything about the case of Timothy Cullen, but, after he saw his first UFO, and he was abducted, he didn't even know it. But, after he had the implant removed, him and his wife were going into town. And his wife was a nurse. And she didn't want to be examined because she just wanted nothing to do with it, the implant situation.
Right.
But he said he was going to town, and they had to go by like this mountainside or, huge hill or whatever it was. He said that this is after the implant, maybe a couple months later. He saw a UFO.
Taken out? Has he got it taken out?
Yeah, Dr. Roger Lear removed the implant on him. But then, several months later, going into town, where he saw the UFO the first time, he saw another UFO. And I said, okay, did you go back to Dr. Lear or to the doctors, the hospital, whatever, and get checked over and see if you got re-implanted? And he goes, no. He didn't want to go through it again.
Yeah. Sure. It's not going to be a happy time. Like we said at the beginning, you've got 10 or 20% of these guys are they're not our friends. Whereas the other 75 or 80% probably would parlay with us if, like I say, if we got a little more civilized towards each other, nation to nation, and didn't keep, wrangling, what do you call that, rattling our swords, whenever we don't like the other countries doing with their trade or with their, whatever, internal policies.
Well,
so,
I always talk about, I remember one of the old Twilight Zones series where, the aliens came down to Earth and they gave, the scientists this big, thick book, and they managed to interpret the first part of the book, the cover of the book. It says, "To Serve Man." Do you remember that episode?
How to Serve Man. Great story.
Yeah.
Go ahead, go tell it.
But it came down, they were trying to break the whatever the text was in the book. And they were trying their best, and they weren't getting any luck. Meanwhile, these aliens, at the airports, instead of seeing these, jets or, all the airplanes, taking people to, like, Miami, they were taking them to their planet, to go sightseeing. And,
Right.
thousands of people were, like a lottery, were, going on these free trips to this planet, that is like heaven compared to Earth, right?
Right.
And
right.
then
they go by the hundreds and thousands willingly.
Yeah, they're going there, and then he got chosen to go, and he was getting on the ship, and one of his assistants come running out to him, and she says, "Don't get on the ship." And he goes, "Why? We broke it. To Serve Man is a cookbook."
Rod Serling had a wicked imagination, you have to admit. He was the author of those stories, so God bless him. I knew, I actually was good friends with a girlfriend of his, and he was like that in real life. Kind of morbid, dark, Great story.
Oh, yeah,
Great
but
story.
you never know. I mean, he could have hit it right, or him and his writers could have hit that one right on the jackpot there, To Serve Man.
Yeah.
It's not what we think it is. Believe me this way, if a spaceship came landing, and all of a sudden we acknowledge there's aliens and UFOs and we're really friendly with them, and they go, "Well, hey, we got this exchange program, right? You go to our planet and one of ours comes on our to your planet. You better watch out."
Yeah. Well, look what the conquistadors did when they found the New World, the West Indies, after Columbus. What did they do? They raped the women. They killed the men, children. They took their gold. They made them slaves. They made them work in the mines.
Yeah, and they killed them off with all their viruses that they weren't, they didn't have no immunity for. So, thousands of them died off from things like the flu and, chicken pox and all this stuff. It killed off the majority of them.
Yeah. Now the aliens know we have hydrogen bombs and nuclear technology, so they're not going to try something like that with us.
Well, you don't know, but they could have something to neutralize it before, there's been so many, sightings. Look at what happened over the air base over in England, back like 25 years ago. Supposedly a UFO and, encounters where a lot of the MPs and the service people actually saw it, and they actually went out trying to find aliens or whatever. But then not just that, there's been reports of through the years, like a UFO going over a old Nike's, base, underground base. And all of a sudden, everything started malfunctioning. I mean, they probably have the capability of, disarming us really instantly. So our nuclear bombs, might not do, or hydrogen bombs or whatever we have might not do anything.
Yeah. Well, that is speculation I don't want to talk about because it's speculation, and you got to realize that if there was an attack on America or on Russia, there would be by Instagram, there would be a coalescence of the nations against the intruder, the enemy, and that's what they're probably thinking would happen.
I don't know. I again, if they have the technology to come to our world and do it, and probably the speed they do, either through wormholes or how they do it, kind of, they might have the technology if they wanted to take out the planet, like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the, galaxy. I mean, they could maybe just push a button and, hey, they don't have to worry about us.
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't be spending all these thousands of years coming and going and visiting us and doing their flybys. If they really wanted to, they would have already done it. So, like I'm saying, to our listeners, there's no need to be afraid of extraterrestrials as a group. But I'm saying amongst them, just like we have criminals in our society, there will be a segment of that society that you won't trust with anything. Now, how are you going to know that? Well, you won't until you can either telepathically talk to them, in some fashion, or you can know their language if they have a language. But the best thing to do is to go on with your life, improve your situation, help your neighbors, lead a moral life, and try to keep your wits about you, because there's so much bad news. By the way, I just noticed a couple of things on some of your program guests. They tend to kind of dip into the bad news too much. So I was going to mention this to your listeners, and this is how it came about. One day, about 3, 4, maybe 5 months ago, I was getting into a somewhat foul mood, Gary, a foul mood, which I hardly ever get into. And I said to myself, let me just check with Google. I picked up my Android phone and I said, okay, Google, did anything good happen today? That was the exact thing I asked Google, and guess what came up?
I have no idea.
The goodnewsnetwork.org. And I tell this to everybody I talk to, you gotta get with this program. They search the globe for good news, for people helping others, for extraordinary examples of humanity. And boy, you want to have a great night's sleep, spend a half an hour reading the stories. It's just phenomenal. I do it every night religiously before I go to bed, and I feel so much better, and I sleep so much better.
Well,
goodnewsnetwork.org, and I support them monetarily as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, we knew we need something like that. Back when I was in broadcasting, first started out back in '76, one of the things we had on one of the stations that was called the Good News. We do like 10 minutes of the news, per day. It was all good news, but that was about the only station I ever worked at. It did that. But the problem is that if you go on the regular mainstream news, I mean, it's not very good anymore. I mean, it's all about the stock market. Yeah. It's about the tariffs. It's about, Russia's pissed off at us. China's pissed off at us. Collapse of monetary, it's all this stuff. And you read this, and it really gives you a negative attitude towards, your life, because, you read all this stuff. It's gotten more. So, yeah, fake news, maybe not, but, they don't spend much time on the good news. I guess good news doesn't sell.
Yeah. There are things that happen in the world that are bad. People do commit heinous crimes, and people do miscalculate and target the wrong person or group. In fact, in the book Exile to Earth, it's one of the chapters where on the planet that Elvis Apolliani, who's our hero, comes from, they have a practice is when a person commits a grievous crime. I'll give you an example. They get the person not so much to put him in prison, but to have him work out through restitution and exchange for having done what they did. And here's the example. In my book, a man basically hacked another man to death who he thought was fooling around with his wife, sexually, right? Well, he kills the man, but in court, They find him guilty. Then normally you go away for life, right? Or 20 years to life. Well, what they did is he then became the father of the children and the husband of the wife. And he did so willingly. And he says, now you have, by the way, he was wrong. The man wasn't seducing his wife or being seduced by his wife. It was a case of mistaken identity. So the court judged him guilty, but his sentence was, you're now this man's widow's husband, and you're going to be taking care of the children until they're 18 or 19 or 20 for the rest of your life. And that would be a civilized way to handle something like that, you know?
Well, I kind of like how the Eskimos used to do it. You know, what they used to do is if somebody committed murder or did something wrong, they would take and put the person on like a little island, and that's where they would have to serve their life or so many years. But it's not productive, Gary. Come on, that's not productive. Well, it is. The guy's not dead. I mean, they could have executed him. Instead,
see, the man. Here's the thing. Here's the theory behind why I put it into the book. The planet from which this alien came from is advanced to ours, just as these visitors are advanced to ours. So it makes sense they're going to have a much higher belief in man's ability to redeem himself, to get straight. So you give the man a chance to be a member of society again. He goes and does something which puts him outside the pale. He's no longer a member of society. You don't treat him as a incorrigible miscreant, a cretin, a monster. You say, okay, you made a major mistake here, but you can make amends. You can do something, and you can stay within the guidelines of a civilized society. And that's what we're trying to do with our character in Exile to Earth. He was banished to Earth for major crimes they didn't commit, but they didn't find out about the ones he did commit. You see? And that's why. See? That's why he needs redemption. So it's a story about interstellar redemption. And it's the same with that guy who murdered or hacked to death, supposedly his wife's lover, which he wasn't. And this happens to many, many people. Many people are incarcerated for 10, 20 years, and they didn't commit the crime. You follow?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you know...
And so they're isolated. They're of no use to society for 10 to 20 years when they could be. And boy, are they happy to be exonerated. That's the type of thing I'm talking about in my book. True redemption includes forgiveness and an ability and a plan to become a useful member of society again. Because that's the criminal. The criminal has lost his respect for himself, therefore he's lost respect for others. And if you can get him to get the idea that he can regain his respect, no matter what it takes, they usually will take that path, and they will work hard to get back into good graces with their fellow man.
Well, I will say this. In Washington State today, they actually banned, the Supreme Court of our state banned putting people to death. So everybody who's been waiting to be, put to death, their sentence now is life in prison. There's been I just touched on something. I know it's a little bit off the subject, but there's been so many people gone to prison for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years that were totally innocent. And they were locked up, and, that is so bad. I don't believe in the death penalty. I never have. I don't think it's right as a civilization. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. I'm agreeing with you there. We try. There's so many reasons to not survive these days. So why make it harder for somebody to survive? To give it the best they can, to give it another shot. What's it to lose? If the guy screws up again, okay, so screw up again. So hey, we've all screwed up more than once. Gosh, it's part of living.
We all screw up. I hate to say it. if they wanted to put people in prison, they could probably put 99% of the whole population in prison for something somebody has done, that they either didn't realize they did it, or they knew they did it. Maybe they cheated on their taxes. Maybe they did something. Who knows? But, I mean, we all make mistakes, and we all do wrong things in our life, being from a kid all the way up to an adult. All we can try to do is our best. Hey, our time is up here for tonight. Again, why don't you tell everybody your website, where they can find your book, and your Facebook. Let's get all this out.
Okay. I just want to let the listeners know that I put out 2 new books this year. They're nonfiction, 2018. One's called The Careless Driver. I was a professional chauffeur for several years, and I decided to write a book after repeatedly seeing poor driving from drivers around me. And that came out in March, and the newest book is How to Stay Healthy Till We Die. But all this can be found at Chas Van Heiden. It's German, Van Heiden. It's okay to say Hayden. That's the American pronunciation. ChasVanHeidenBooks.com. That's where my website is, and you can always send me comments and questions at the contact form, and I'd be very happy to respond.
Now, your Facebook, how can they find you on Facebook?
Facebook is Chas Van Heiden. I guess it's Facebook/Chas Van Heiden. I think that's it.
Okay, now, how about Amazon? Is your books available on Amazon?
Yep, they're all up there, except the newest one. I have to revise it. They're asking me to do the cover again, so that's not quite ready to go, but it will be in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, sir. Well, anyway, we got to run. Now, in November, we're going to be talking all about UFOs, aliens, and stuff like that. So if you're interested in coming back on, like mid-November or something, please contact us, and we'll get you back on.
Very interested. Yeah, and I've got dozens of bookmarks and lots more information that I'd like to share with your listeners.
Okay, sir. Hey, I enjoyed listening to you, and
likewise.
You're a great guest.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Okay, sir. You have a great evening, and thank you for coming on Night Dreams.
You're welcome. Good night.
Night.
Please check out the Night Dreams Talk Radio website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Also, if you want to keep our show free of advertising, just hit the donate button. Give $1 or $2. Remember, all prior shows are always free to listen to. We at Night Dreams Talk Radio thank you for your support.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, that was an interesting guess here tonight. UFOs. I mean, there's a certain, either you believe there's UFOs or you don't. You believe there's aliens or you believe there don't. If you have ever had an encounter with an alien, a UFO, been abducted or had an implant, please get a hold of me at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. I had a cough there. I'm sorry. But again, it's nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. Boy, this flu is still hanging in there a little bit. I'm hoping here in the next few days this cough will go away. Of course, smoking cigars, I guess, maybe doesn't help the situation. But, I'm just curious if you ever, saw a UFO close up or at a distance that you knew that it was a UFO or had an encounter with an alien, or if you've been abducted. I really do want to hear from you because, a whole month of November, we're going to be talking pretty much about UFOs, aliens, abductions, implants. We'll have Timothy Cullen back on talking about his situation where he was abducted, had an implant put in his arm, and had Dr. Roger Lear remove it. and what he went through on various different TV shows where he was interviewed with Dr. Roger Lear, the good and the bad and the ugly of the interviews. So that'll be rather interesting. We got Charles Meek coming on. A lot of people will be on, talking about UFOs. And you could be one of them, because I did allow about 10 days out of the month of November for, you to be a guest if you had an encounter with UFOs. I do feel that we are on a reboot on this planet, maybe the third or fourth or fifth time. I have no idea. I think we've been rebooted and helped by, I don't know if they're our friends, but them out there. I'm sure, just like different countries, there's going to be aliens from another solar system that might be neutral towards humans, and being very inquisitive, like, wow, look how far they went from cover wagon days to flying our aircraft that we fly. This night and day difference over about 100-year period. I mean, technology is advanced so far. And then you start looking at things like, did our technology move from Roswell? Some of the objects that were supposedly recovered from that crash, has that speeded up our technology and other crash UFOs? And supposedly that, UFOs that crashed, that we managed to secure complete UFOs. I don't know. Area 51, are they still there? Well, my informers are telling me Area 51 doesn't really have anything in UFOs anymore. It's now Area 52. So, I mean, if you want to go march on Area 51, like one person wants to do, I think you're marching on the wrong area. I think you need to be looking at Area 52, not 51. But anyway, I just want to also say that I have made a decision, and it was really hard to do here today. I did have the weekend host, Michael W. Hall. I had to make a decision to no longer carry his show. Mainly is, I think very highly of Michael. I think he, is doing the best he can do at trying to prove UFOs exist. The problem I find that, I'm an old school broadcaster, and there's some things I didn't agree was going on. But my main thing is that I devote every day. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I take my daughter to work. I get home by 5:30, 5:45. And the next thing I do is I start answering hundreds of emails and texts I get from my listeners. I take the time to respond. I at least try to respond to every one of them. Sometimes it takes me a few days because over the weekend I get overwhelmed with emails from people. A lot, again, I'm going to say, from the UK, Australia, and Europe and places like that. But I get a lot of emails, a lot. So I take the time to respond. So that takes me a couple hours every day to go through and read every email. And then I get, on top of it, on my other account, I get people wanting to be guests on my show. So then I have to make contact with them, and then, back and forth asking them questions before I bring them on my show, and to verify their stories and find out if they're going to be a good fit for Nightdreams Talk Radio. So I do that. So next thing I know, it's time for me to pick my daughter up from work, and then I set up to do the show that night, with, getting everything ready, the information, about the guest and what he's going to be talking about. I had that all laid out here. So I spend on the average, maybe 10 to 12 hours a day, 5-6 days a week working on the show. Plus I've been remodeling the studio. and all that stuff, putting in more better equipment, better soundproofing, a different server, and all that stuff. It just came to a point that physically, because I have Linda who helps me with the bookings, but I do everything else. It's pretty much a one-man operation, just like Peter Davenport does with the UFO Reporting Center. It's pretty much a one-man operation with him. So, I have to do everything. And, that's why I mentioned about donations. If you could donate $1 or $2, that'll help keep us going. For I don't have to have advertising on the show. I really don't want to do that, because the last group of advertisers I had one of them, it was starting to dictate to me who I could have on my show and who I shouldn't have on my show. I didn't agree with that, and I got really upset, so I quit taking advertising. I don't want to bring advertising back on the show. I don't. But, the expense of running the server, the bandwidth, I have to pay for some of the different apps. I have to, the server, the company that handles, the bandwidth. I got all that. Plus, I got the internet fees. I got all this stuff, and it's all coming out of my general pocket. So, and for the people who have been donating, I want to say thank you. It's been a big help. But like I said, I don't want to bring advertisers on. I really don't. And I don't want to have to start charging for the archives. I really feel that should be free. But it got to the point where, I was doing my show, and I just explained how many hours a day and a week I spend, doing this show. It's a lot. It's worse than a full-time job. Seriously. And then I had to board up his 2 shows. So, this got to a point, like on the weekends, I didn't have no time for my family, because I would, have to set up to do the show for him. I had to board operate the show. I had to, whatever. I'd even find some guests for him. It got to a point I just couldn't do it anymore. And I need to concentrate on our show, Nightdreams Talk Radio. So I made the decision today that, I just can't, I don't want to, and I don't want to carry any other host on my show right now. I really don't, unless I can find one that's willing to step up and do what it needs to do for his show. I just can't spread myself that thin anymore. So anyway, I just wanted to let people know, because I've already had people asking me, well, gee, what's going on about the UFO I-Team or the Paranormal Lawyers show? Well, that's what's happening. I just can't physically do my show and board up and everything and promote to his shows and my shows. It just wasn't enough time in the week. I want to give you guys the best show I can. And I'm not saying on a great show. I'm not saying on a bad show either. I'm probably in between, lukewarm, whatever. So I just wanted to get this out once and only, and I'm not going to talk about it again. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here like about 10 minutes early tonight. But, I really, how can I say this? I really love our country. I really love people in general. And I'm really concerned right now. It's just, I don't want to get always in negative, because I do the news every night, and I'm talking about hurricanes. I'm talking about Antarctica, earth changes. Well, you know what? When I started talking about all this stuff a year ago, people would sit there and go, ha, 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 Gary, you don't know what you're talking about. Now those same people are coming back and saying, oh, my God, you were right. Okay, well, you know what? We can't treat our planet this way and expect to have a place to put our feet. I can see some of the grounds that our administration has done for putting tariffs, because let's face it, we were being robbed. Jobs, we were being robbed, technology. Real quick story. Back in the 80s, I used to own a computer manufacturing company, and I used to actually design computers. I've had electronic background since I was a kid. My dad was an electronic engineer. I had my amateur license. I really was into electronics at one point in my life. Made a mistake. I designed a computer, sent it over at that time to, I think, Korea. Not North Korea, but South Korea. No, I take that back. It was Taiwan. I apologize. I take that back. Taiwan. And you know what? It didn't take long. My designs, my everything, because I had to supply them schematics where they could build it. I had to meet with their engineers. We had to work out any little problems. Well, it didn't take 6 months after they started manufacturing my equipment. It was being bootlegged. It was being sold. And all of a sudden, people were designing computers by putting them in a case and selling them in the United States. I had to go to the point, like when we designed our computers, we had to submit it to the FCC. That's before we first would have to send it to a lab, have it tested for emissions where it wouldn't interfere with, emergency broadcasting, the TV stations, hospital, the police bands, and it had to be tested for that. Then we would then send that a piece of equipment to the FCC in Maryland, and they would run tests on it to make sure, everything was, designed right and didn't do any interference. They would give us a grant, identifier number to manufacture it. Well, what happened is all this stuff being bootlegged in Taiwan, people were buying them, putting them in the case. The FCC didn't have the money to go through and hit these people with fines because it was, it seemed like everybody down the local corner was building computers back in the 80s, and they weren't doing it legal. And, it was really frustrating. But that's the way things are. And that's how it is now with China. Okay, you send something over there to be made in China. Doesn't take long. They make knockoffs of it, right? And they're selling it, at a lower price than you can sell it. So I can see our president doing what he's doing. But the problem is we have three things that's going on right now. Okay, we have the feds raising, and talking about they're going to raise the interest rate up at least 3 or 4 more times. That has got, the stock market investors panicky. Now the tariffs, that's now another whammy. And then what's going on with Russia, what's going on with North Korea, and what's going on with China. And everybody is scared. And the stock markets are taking a big dump over in Europe and in China and the United States. And I don't know where it's going to go. I hope it doesn't go like it did in the 80s where the stock market took a huge dump. That is scary. And I don't know. Myself, yes, I probably wouldn't have levied. If I was the president, I wouldn't have probably gone as far as our president did on the tariffs as fast as he did. I probably would have took it a lot slower and not as high dollar amount because, let's face it. We've had a lot of negative news. Just think last week, the Chinese destroyer tried ramming the United States destroyer. What would happen if they would have collided? Could something have escalated from that? The tension is really high. So right now, all the news you're getting is bad. And then the hurricanes just keep coming and getting worse. And all these people that have no place to live. And, a lot of these people have, besides no place to live, they have no job now, a lot of them. And they don't have no money. So, and it's really bad about our society. When something bad happens and it's not in your neighborhood, we have a tendency of about a week goes by and people kind of like, oh, well, it's over with. And they move on. But how about all these people that lost their houses, lost their income, lost their money, don't have a place really to live and wonder how they're going to survive day to day? That's what scares me. But yet we can invest money in arms and I don't know. I just get so frustrated. And I'm just thinking of you, my friends out there. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Everybody have a great a night, and we'll be back on tomorrow. So we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Please check out the Nightdreams Talk Radio website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Also, if you want to keep our show free of advertising, just hit the donate button. Give a buck or two. Remember, all prior shows are always free to listen to. We at Nightdreams Talk Radio thank you for your support.
Hiring you as our wedding planner was a huge mistake.
Ma'am, I told you, there's nothing I can do about your fiancé's dance moves.
No, this wedding venue and catering bundle. You should have warned me it would be, like, whatever this is.
But you wanted this lovely barn setting, so rustic.
Yeah, I really didn't think the farm animals would be in the barn during the wedding.
Don't worry, they won't be here long. Did you order the beef or the chicken?
Stuck in a bad bundle? Get a great one. Switch to AT&T Fiber with speeds up to 300 megabits per second and DirecTV. Bundle for $75 a month for 1 year after discounts with 24-month TV and 12-month internet agreements. Limited availability. May not be in your area. See if you qualify at att.com/bundle. AT&T. More for your thing. That's our thing. Ends 8/17/19. New approved customers. Include select TV package and Internet 300. Speeds not guaranteed and vary. Requires autopay, paperless, and combined bill. Price higher in second year. Pay $80 per month until discount starts in 3 bills. Equipment lease, early termination, equipment non-return, taxes, fees, and restrictions apply.
Hey, Nashville. You know Big Lots is all about big deals, but we've recently made some big changes, too. We're talking remodel, people. We've redone your Big Lots, located at 4109 Lebanon Pike, and the grand opening celebration continues. So it's a great time to get in on all the Big Lots Labor Day savings. And the new store design makes it super easy to find the deals you love. So, Nashville, come see the big changes and big deals in store for you. Live big, save lots. Big Lots.